Greetings, my friends. Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at a relatively new release from Jinhao. This is the 9016, a natural follow-up to the 9019. Of course, we know that 9019 was released sometime last year, and it was much liked by most of the people that tried it. The problem with the 9019 was that it is a large pen with a very large and thick grip section, and that's not comfortable for everyone. So I imagine Jinhao took this to the drawing board and came up with a smaller version in order to please a wider range of users. So we're going to take a look at this and compare it to the bigger brother, and stay tuned until the end where we do some writing samples. The pen arrives in a usual Chinese shipping box, and it's very nicely secured with bubble wraps as usual. The demonstrator version has a fude nib. The other two have a extra fine and a medium nib. The white one has an extra fine nib, and the black one has a medium nib. Yeah. I do have a fine nib also that I haven't inked up. So we're going to take a look at these three and see how they perform. Just uncapping the pen takes about 3 turns. It's about 2 hours and 50 minutes. So that's almost 3 turns. That gets us to the nib, which seems like a number 6 steel nib. This nib seems suspiciously familiar. It seems like the one on the original 159, as well as the X750. Not a bad nib, but it seems like it's a copy of basically the old 159. The feed is plastic. It seems like the same feed. We'll compare this to the 9019. The grip section is a little bit shorter compared to the 9019. Let's compare it to the Pilot. That's the Pilot 823. Seems like the same length. Of course, the 9016 is a little bit thicker. And the 9016 has a few more thread turns, of course. So there we go. That's the nib. This one is the extra fine. And what I find interesting is that this one came with usual Jinhao nib, and the other one came with a similar nib, but it's stamped 18 karat gold plated. They're probably different badges of the same nib that are stamped differently. This one is not marked. The cap is similar to the 9019. The ring is the same, and that screw inside is similar to the 9019, almost impossible to get to. I do have a video on how to disassemble the 9019 cap for cleanup in case you get ink behind the demonstrator cap. So uncapping this pen brings us to the converter. This is similar style to the 9019, but do not be fooled. It's not the same converter. It looks the same. The 9019 converter is a little bit larger, although this one is also pretty big. I would say it holds a good amount of ink. A little bit different. It's only when you put them side by side that you realize how much larger the 9019 converter is. It's probably about 10 to 15% larger in capacity. This converter seems pretty big for the pen size. It seems much larger than the usual international converter. I'm surprised to see that they actually redesigned a converter for a smaller pen. I imagine they could have extended the barrel a bit. Although the girth would be an issue, so I don't think the 9019 converter would fit in this. The pen feels very nice in hand in terms of size. However, it feels a little bit cheap and it rattles actually. I thought maybe they redesigned the converter to decrease the rattle that we had in 9019, but unfortunately the rattle is there. The demonstrator version is the same. Both of these look a little bit cheaper than the 9019 does in hand. It may be the heft of the 9019 that actually makes it feel a little bit less cheap. But these pens are very light and the plastic seems very, very disposable. The clip is similar to the Big Brother, although it's not as stiff as the bigger brother. It's a little bit springier. I guess they listened to the complaints about the very, very stiff clip on the 9019. Compare this to the usual suspects. We see that compared to the Asvine P36, it's a little bit smaller. Compared to the Vanishing Point, it seems like it's a little bit taller. Compared to P630 Wingsun, a little bit shorter. And compared to the Mont Blanc 146, it seems a little bit shorter. Maybe a couple of millimeters shorter. And it is much shorter than my dip pen. That's my favorite dip pen. And compared to our favorite Lamy Safari, about the same size, although the girth is a little bit more. So very nicely done, good proportion. The nib from the old 159 and X750s will probably work just fine on this pen. We'll get to a writing sample towards the end of this video. But in terms of pros and cons, I have done, just a preview, I've done writing samples with all these pens. And right off the bat, I dislike the Fude nib. Although it's Fude style, the tip on this pen is very thick and it's not very possible or easy to get thin lines. So if you're into drawing and you want thinner lines, it'll be difficult. I guess this could be modified to write thinner lines, but that's a chore. And to be honest, for a $6 price tag, it's really hard to fault Jinhao. There are better Fude nibs for around $20 to $25 from Sailor. They do okay job. Sailor also has more expensive Fude nibs that are not much different than the cheaper ones. The medium nib is pretty smooth, and the fine nib is also very smooth. Sorry, the extra fine nib is very smooth. I have not inked the fine nib. Compared to the larger pen, this is much easier to use for a longer duration. So for pros, I would say for $6, it's really hard to fault this pen. It's very convenient, easy to get, and easy to write with, easy to handle and for a longer session. And it's also easy to buy in multiples and gift it to people that we want to infect with the fountain pen bug. So I would recommend this pen for those who are just getting into fountain pen business, or those who want to take fountain pen to work and not worry about the fountain pen walking away. I've used the 9019 for about 4 or 5 months now, and I've noticed that it's a little bit difficult to write for longer sessions. My other experience with this larger pen has been that it actually dries out and has hard starts after you let it go for overnight even. It's not the problem with one of these Jinhaos, but multiple of them, they have difficulty restarting. So getting to the cons, the feeling of the pen is pretty cheap, and to the 21st century, there should be no pen that takes 50 turns to turn. That's why I don't have an Opus 88 anymore. If you're a student and want to take it to class, forget about it. The lecture will be over by the time you uncap your pen. I recommend Medjone 1 or the Pilot Vanishing Point are excellent replacement or excellent pen for this purpose. They're far superior for any of these cheaper pens, including the Jinhao as well as the Wingsun P630. I've had problem with the steel nibs from the Wingsun. So those are my 2 cents. I definitely recommend this pen for experimentation and getting into fountain pens. And before I get into some writing samples, I would like to thank you for tuning in, and I would like to see you in the next video. Goodbye.